Hey guys, welcome to the definitive ranking of A Link to the Past, the granddaddy of them all.
Yeah.
Some would say.
It feels like kind of early to do this one, but
I think Game Informer said it's the greatest game of all time.
I think IGN said it's the second greatest game of all time. Yeah, I don't know.
Well, this is what we think, and the staff thinks, and the community thinks. We both replayed the game recently.
Yes.
Did you, is this a game that you're more familiar with than Oracle Seasons and Twilight Princess?
Yes, not Twilight Princess, actually. So, A Link to the Past, quick background, is like a game from a little bit before I comprehended video games. It came out when I was 1, but my grandfather actually was big into The Legend of Zelda and A Link to the Past, and then he got me into subsequent games. And so this is a game in my memory of like picking it up as like a 3-year-old at my grandpa's house and like, you know, seeing this world and it seeming wild and like, you know, totally mystified by it, you know, and just impressed and awed by it, but, you know, not fully understanding the game.
Right.
So when I really came to appreciate it was actually when I was like around like 20 years old.
Okay.
And going back after becoming a Zelda fan. So,
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
This is a game for me that this was my childhood game in a sense. I had an NES, but I was too really young sort of like to comprehend what was going on.
Right.
But the Super Nintendo, this is like, I was like 6-7 years old, and this was my game as a kid.
Right. And we know going into this that this is kind of your...
I still remember like trash talking to friends, like I could beat this game in one day, and that was like a big deal.
Now that's like, wow.
Yeah, now it's like, what's your best time? Oh, 24 hours? This is my favorite video game.
Yeah.
So
A video game.
Yeah. There's a few that come close, but like, you know, if I had to answer on any given day, it's going to be A Link to the Past.
So let's expect some high marks here.
Yeah.
From Moss.
Okay, so let's jump right into it. The world of A Link to the Past. We both gave it.
We are totally in agreement.
A 5. What does the world mean to you?
Well, I just think of, you know, right away when you start playing this game, you know, after you do a little bit of like brief tutorial, like the world is just, it's open. To me, it's like a prototype of like an open world game. Now there are actually a lot of like gates throughout the world, but it does not feel like it.
Right.
They don't feel artificial, you know, and you're not even aware of the other gate, which is there's this whole other dual world, you know.
Right.
But yeah, you start and you can do things right away out of order, with still some like linearity built into it. To me, this is one of the best Zelda worlds in from a gameplay perspective.
Right.
100%.
Yeah. Right after you beat like the sewers and you get out of the sanctuary, yeah, you can go anywhere. You can't go to Death Mountain yet. There's some places where big boulders block your path, but I mean, you could. Like I used to always go to Kakariko Village. That's sort of like my route, but you don't have to.
That's what's great about it is the game guides you. It's like you could go here. And they even mark it on your map. But if you know what you're doing, you can just skip that.
Yeah,
you know?
You can go explore near the lake. There's a whole bunch of items you can get before even going to the Eastern Palace as well. So it's like totally like do what you want to do. Not like there's an infinite amount of things to do, but there's quite a bit.
Yeah, and there's like, yeah, I mean, this will tie back into the pacing later, but there's like story beats that like little things that you can, you know, witness or if, you know, you can not witness, and it weirdly makes the world feel like a world, you know.
Okay.
Like one small example is like when you can go back to the sanctuary after the priest there is attacked and he'll like disappear or whatever. It's similar to the guard in the alleyways in Ocarina of Time, where it's like you could just miss that, or because they tell you to go there, but you could not. And it feels like that thing happens whether you go there or not.
Right.
I love that kind of stuff. Yeah.
And the ultimate thing to me is the dual world. This is the first game to do it.
Yeah.
Arguably maybe the best game to do the two world system.
Yeah. I mean, with the dual world, it's had me think about what we've at least covered so far, and it's, it, to me, it has a lot of, when I'm thinking about what could have been improved about Twilight Princess in terms of having this dark world associated with it, it's like, there's already a prototype here for it.
Right.
Not saying it needs to do the exact same thing, but I can't think of another Zelda game that has done this common, repeated theme as well as this game.
Yeah, and to me, it bleeds right over into the next category to me, the art style, because I love, like, Hyrule feels like this happy, jolly, colorful place, and then you go to the Dark World, and everything's like gold and dark a little bit,
twisted inverse of it, yeah.
And I love this, like, yin and yang almost interaction that the two worlds have.
Yeah, and almost seeing the characters and maybe their counterparts, or at least like the location counterparts. And this game has a lot of cool, like, tiny little characters too throughout it, which is pretty, I think, even impressive to this time, like how they can, through a couple little dialogue options.
Yeah, there's like characters, they're kind of like all over the world, like sprinkled in, like little guys.
Yeah, who just tell you little interesting things. A lot of hints, obviously, but even those are told in kind of a fun way, which I love. And of course, this game introduced Kakariko Village, which has become a staple of the series.
Right.
And at this time, Zelda 2 had a ton of little towns, but they really didn't differentiate too much.
Right. And
you kind of did the same thing in all of them. So this has one, or maybe two if you count the Thieves Town.
Yeah. Well.
But it's, it's really like the first fully fleshed out kind of town in Zelda. So,
yeah, it's got its own music too.
Yeah, it's got its own music. It's got
a lot of people there too.
People who, do different things. There's people who try to sell you out to the guards. You can go talk to the flute boy's dad at the milk bar or whatever it is. So I love it. I think that's great.
Yeah, and some NPCs are completely useless, but then other ones are just sick and want to give you a net.
Yeah, and there's a lot of little things, like just some guy who's like, my brother's mad at me. He's walled himself off in the other room. Yeah. And you can break the wall, and the other brother says, I can't even remember what he says, but
it's the most smallest, like, most useless side, like,
it's not even a side quest.
It's like, oh, the door's open. Maybe I should talk to him now. Like,
yeah, that doesn't need to exist, but I love it. I just like these.
You've solved this problem of these brothers somehow.
It's kind of satisfying in a weird way. I love it.
So yeah, the art style.
We also both agreed on that, huh?
Yeah, and I kind of touch upon it a little bit because to me it blends with the world.
Yes.
At least the overworld a little bit.
Oh, 100%.
Because I love the feeling of being in the Dark World, especially the first time with the music, the giant pyramid.
Right.
It just fits so well with this game. I don't. Maybe I've got some nostalgia blinders on, but
no. I actually think like this art style not only like holds up, but if a game came out today, it looked exactly like this, it would be praised.
Okay.
For some of the stuff it does. Just there's all these like little touches that I think are really cool things you can do with a pixelated 16-bit art style like that. For example, just like when you're in the Lost Woods and there's the, the light coming down through the treetops, it still looks amazing. There's just little things like when you're in the thieves' hideout, even in Kakariko in the Light World, there's like the little light shining in from outside. And I think it has a cool effect when you're on Death Mountain and you can see the clouds below, and there's kind of like a, what is it, the parallax scrolling of it. It looks, I think it still looks impressive to this day. And it's something that, they made a art style that will just continue to age. Yeah. Whereas other things of its contemporaries will not.
Right. And this is in the, like, sort of in the history of video games, this is kind of this was sort of the turning point in graphical styles in a sense where, there was like, whatever, like the old Apple games, and then there was the NES 8-bit, then it was a 16-bit, and then they jumped to like that early 3D, really. Yeah. And I feel that the Super Nintendo, this is maybe talking about the era as a whole, is more timeless than even some of the games that came after.
Yeah, I think this was. I mean, there have been games, more contemporary, modern games that have kind of excelled at some of these art styles, but this was kind of the peak of it
Right.
at the time, like them taking advantage of this stuff to its full
Yeah.
ability, I think.
And this was also a fairly early Super Nintendo game too. This was not like when they had years
That's
of it.
true, yeah.
So this
91, right?
Yeah, the NES was still going strong when this game came out.
Yeah, absolutely.
So-
So even even by the end of it, it still held up. And I would have given this category a 5 based on that alone, but also the official art for this is like peak. It's so awesome.
this was I like it. I do, but this kind of bugs me a little bit. It started the trend of, I think, Nintendo scaling back a little bit with some of the artwork.
Okay.
So I love that in Legend of Zelda and Adventure of Link, you open up the manual and you search through, and it's got all the scene artwork, and then every enemy has its own art.
Right, okay.
This has more of a selective bestiary where it has some art, but it's not everything.
It's got some cool scenes, though, too.
It does. And actually, there's some good art from this game that came out post this game, if that makes sense. I remember looking at like some of the Link's Awakening strategy guys where they're looking back at A Link to the Past and they released new artwork. There's this awesome one of Link fighting Ganon.
Yeah, I know that one. That's that's like one of my favorite Zelda pieces.
But that's not actually in the manual. That's not in the
so I don't know if that would be a factor in my ranking, but
yeah.
I still think maybe there's less of it, but to me it's some of my favorite pieces.
Okay.
So
I actually like, considering the games that came before, I actually like the art of Link from Legend of Zelda more.
Okay.
The official art, at least.
Okay. Well,
we'll get to that.
We'll get to that
sometime in the next 14 months. This is one that I had a lot of trouble with.
Yeah.
The story. I'll start with this one because first I sort of just talked about it, but the manual, it actually has quite a bit of backstory in it, and I don't know. Yeah, I don't know if you went back and looked at it.
Yeah, I think it's really cool. And the artwork for that is cool too.
It does. I like that. It shows the sort of like the creation of Hyrule story. There's like, it talks about the Triforce. It talks about the imprisoning war. Mm-hmm. So there is a lot of, and like the rise of Aghanim a little bit.
Yeah, and I can already tell there are probably people who like count that against it, but I think it's really interesting backstory and it kind of helps paint the picture. But like with a lot of this game, I don't think it's necessarily vital for you to understand this game.
I also feel this is a sign of the times as well, where this was expected during that era, that you open up the manual. It's like, there's like the age-old story, like you go with your parents to to get your video game and you open it up and you're reading the manual before you can play it.
That's actually why I would normally consider the official art as part of it too, because it's part of the whole experience, I think. Mm-hmm. Maybe not now, but So
there's actually quite a bit of story, like, I feel, throughout the game. And there's a lot of sub-stories with some of the characters. Mm-hmm. As a kid, a lot of this just totally flew over my head because I didn't really understand what was going on. I knew the simplistic story of Aghanim kidnapped these descendants of the sages, mm-hmm. And now you got to save them. And that's the bare bone, the vanilla version of this story.
Yeah.
Now, there is a lot more to the story, and especially once you're in the Dark World after you save each of the maidens and they give you a...
Yeah.
And I don't know if you feel this way, but do you feel that almost like the grammar or like the vocabulary of this is like at a higher level than most Zelda games? Where I sometimes have to reread sentences a couple times to get the point that they're trying to make.
I didn't feel that way, no. But
okay.
What I did... I guess maybe similarly, I felt like it's just so, like, everything people are telling you is a bit more vague.
Okay, yeah. There's like, well, I read things and I feel like I have to decipher what is being said.
Okay.
And that's not an issue, I think, later.
Okay.
I don't even know if it's an issue.
I can see what you mean.
But it makes me feel like I don't fully comprehend what's going on.
See, that's actually what I had, why I gave it so high of a marks, is that I love, because the story I feel like is very straightforward, what you described of Save the Maidens, but I like the painting of it, or like the little details they're all so mysterious, which I like. Like, this is before I think a lot of the Zelda series has been demystified. So like the concept of the Triforce. Now every game you start with it and it's on your hand, and it's like, okay, you know, that's a little less, you know, cool and exciting to me. Whereas like now everyone's talking about it like the golden power and all this stuff. I like how a little bit withholding the game is in that regard.
It's a lot more it's more fantasy, it seems, than some of the later games.
Yeah. The later games I feel like are a little bit more of like, I would agree with you. Like, yeah, they want you to understand every bit of it.
And it's more real life scenarios, it seems, and some, well, maybe not real, but like something, I don't know, maybe mythical or mystical might be a better word of what.
I totally can see that for sure.
So I ended up giving it a 3. This was actually the lowest score, or one of the lower scores that both the community and staff gave as well. But you know, I still think it's good, and I think like it's better than most Zelda games, I think.
Yeah, I think so too. Like, I like how it throws you into the action. It doesn't like waste your time. So to me, that's already like at a 3. But then some of the, like I said, some of the, like, it doesn't explicitly need to explain everything to you, I think is good, as opposed to some games where they give you 12 hours of story and they keep adding in more things. But to me, instead of fleshing out the world, they just open up new threads that are unsolved.
Right.
Whereas this, I love. I love that, and I also like how the straightforwardness. It seems even more straightforward when you start. It's like, all right, got to collect the pendants, get the sword, and then at this time you have the twist of like, now there's like this dark world. Yeah, I think they really make that confrontation with Aghanim feel like you're leading up to what feels like a big moment. Now we take that for granted in Zelda, but at the time, like, that seems nuts to me. Yeah. And I again, I love going around and meeting all these characters who just have these, there's this whole idea of what the dark world is and how it turns you into this mirror version of yourself that you kind of have to decipher meaning from a little bit. But I think it's interesting to just go around and meet these people like the bully or the bully or like there's like a random tree guy you talk to who's like, I came here in search of the golden power and now I'm a tree, you know. You just like getting all these little tidbits of like what the dark world means and what it is, and even how it was created ties into that, right? Of like Ganondorf, Ganon, whatever, altering it through because it reflected his heart. Yeah. So I just love all that stuff. Yeah. And you can kind of, I love this. Brings me back to when I was getting into the online community for Zelda, of just reading all these like theories and concepts that people drew from it, as opposed to, again, being like explicitly told this game is about light and dark are the same, two sides of the same coin. Yeah. This, I feel like, nails that. Right. And you mentioned some of the specific characters. I love the little sub story with, it's small, but with the flute boy too. Exactly. I love that. That's been my like online avatar for the last 15 years as well. Both the flute boy and his Dark World counterpart. I've gone back and forth. Oh yeah, it's sad. Yeah, it is. It's like, I want to hear my song one last time, and you play it, and like when you play it, the Dark World music sort of fades down, so you hear just the flute. Yeah, exactly, and it ties into, it's like a side quest because you get something out of it, and I love how this goes back. This is like a game where the thing they say now about Breath of the Wild, where like part of the story is just your exploration. Yes, where someone goes, yeah, hey, there's something like real cool at the east side of the lake, and you can like go over there. And, like, oh, I found ice rod, like, that's one of those things that, like, maybe as a 6-year-old playing this game, I didn't get all that stuff. I'm like, oh, this guy's just talking to me. I don't know what he's saying. Yeah. And then I wouldn't know what to do. And I realize now when I'm playing this game, like, oh, that's not very cryptic at all. He literally just tells you to check out the cave east of the lake to get the ice rod. Definitely, yeah. But now, I like that it doesn't hold your hand.
Yeah.
That's my main thing of rating it so high.
Yeah.
The only reason I didn't go 5 was the maidens really was they're just kind of, they do give you those little bits of story, which is kind of cool, but they're not really that distinct. And I was just coming off of A Link Between Worlds, where at least some of them were kind of interesting.
They're not really characters. They're just...
It didn't really bother me too
same.
much, but, you know, I think there are better Zelda stories, I guess.
You already touched on sort of the pacing a little bit, or at least the beginning of it.
Yes.
Like the start of the game.
It's an amazing introduction.
Right away.
Yeah.
Link's sleeping. It's raining. And it's like there's a dilemma right away. You know what's going on. Like there's a crisis.
Your uncle dies.
Yeah.
And spoilers.
Yeah.
Amazing.
2 minutes into the game.
Again, just another little tidbit of like it's dark. Your uncle's like, there's something wrong at the castle. I gotta go there, and you go after him. It's like, it's compelling. It's raining and the music's playing. Oh, so good.
And he says, "Zelda is your
Oh yeah. Maybe that's some
sister?
vagueness. Yeah, because that doesn't really whatever though.
Yeah.
But then you go. You almost. It's not like a first dungeon, but this. Exploring the castle, and it's kind of open, and it's not necessarily linear. I mean, what you have to do is, but there's a lot of routes you can take, and
it's like right away. Literally the first dungeon already has areas of the dungeon you don't even need to go to either.
Yeah,
because you can choose to go. It's not like it's an enormous dungeon, but I mean,
no.
There's things to explore. You know, there's not really that much to do in Hyrule Castle, but like during this, but it's. For an introduction, I think it's fantastic.
An exciting scene of like escorting Zelda through the sewers.
Yeah.
It's a great way to set the stage.
Yeah.
And then after they spit you out from there, it's like you can do so much. And then after you beat in both the light world and the dark world, after you beat the first dungeon,
right,
it's open. You can find items out of order that you might need later, progress naturally. You could get the flippers pretty early, or you might not realize you need them until Dungeon 2 of the Dark World.
Right.
Which you don't even have to do as Dungeon 2.
Yeah, I used to always get the flippers right after I got the Power Glove, like right when you can get them. But in truth, you don't need them for a very long time, technically, depending on how you play the game. And, you talk about the order. Especially when you're in the Dark World, after you beat the Palace of Darkness, like the maiden tells you, I'll like mark all the locations of the other maidens on your map, and it shows them 2, 3, 4, 5. Naturally, you think you got to go to 2, 3, but you don't have to. And I remember reading forum threads like, "What's your preferred order of dungeons?"
And it is kind of wild what order.
And there's a lot of variation. Like there's some like, okay, you have to get the flute. You have to get the hook shot before but there is the right amount of variability, I think.
Yeah. The only thing, because we also kind of take progression of difficulty into it, so it's like the numbering isn't exactly the order of difficulty, I would say.
Okay.
But the openness of the game makes it work, and I think the game kind of teaches you that it's open. The one thing I would maybe have changed is just to not number them. Just mark all the spots.
Okay,
but
they kind of did that with like A Link Between Worlds too. Yeah,
did they? And they did it with the pendants in the light world. But it's not a big enough knock where I was gonna take off from it, because you can, like, for example, if you go to a level 2 without the flippers, you could be like, oh, I gotta go find them, and then you could just stumble upon another dungeon, kind of like the original Legend of Zelda.
Right.
And so it kind of does teach you that you're gonna have to figure out somewhere else to go, another path.
Right. I actually do think that maybe I disagree a little bit with you, but I do think that while maybe not dungeon to dungeon, the difficulty progression is not maybe perfect, but in terms of like beginning, middle, end, it really ramps up.
I would back that. Yeah.
Like I think, like in the Dark World, like the enemies that appear in Misery Mire and then Turtle Rock are like you encounter some stronger enemies, and I think the dungeons they're both longer, and I think the bosses are more difficult.
Sure.
So I do think I actually really like the progression of difficulty.
I think in groups it definitely works. That again, it wasn't enough to like alter my score. I was looking at a lot of these scores of like it how does this game stand up now as a game? And I think it's strong in that regard too.
I kept thinking to myself, because I was like trying to tell myself, like, I know this is my favorite game, but all right, pacing progress. It's like, what game does it better? Does any game does it? Maybe some games do it just as good, maybe slightly better for some of the. But I'm like, this is almost perfect, and I kept coming back to that same thought over and over.
I think there are other games that do it just as good, but in a different way, or like Ocarina of Time. I think it's less open. It's still pretty open, but it has some more things for you to do between the dungeons. But this has that too. It's just you might not realize you did them hours ago,
right?
Or you might have missed them and you have to go do them,
And well, one of the other things, and we're gonna get to this when we talk about sort of the side content as well, because there's quite a bit of like places to go in the overworld where you find heart pieces or miscellaneous items. They do a good job of like locking them behind like things that you don't have yet.
Yeah.
So this is not like some Zelda games, like especially when I like do the walkthroughs or something. It's like, oh, you've gotten this item, now you can do virtually everything in the world.
Yeah.
Like I think of like Wind Waker or something. Like, oh, you got this item, now you can, if you want, you can go and get 35 heart pieces or something right now.
Okay.
But it's like this one, it's like it actually stuff unlocks and opens up. You don't know it, like when you're just first playing the game, but it's like,
yeah,
oh, now you can get this item. Now you can, and it's.
And I think it's pretty good about like signaling what you would need.
Okay.
Like for just when you can read the tablets, you now know, okay, I can read the tablet like I did to get into the dungeon, but you read the one and it'll be like, hold the Master Sword up.
Right.
So, yeah, what's that?
Yeah.
I don't have the Master Sword.
Yeah.
But then you get the Master Sword. And
right.
Like, okay, I can go back there now.
That's a perfect example. Like, you're talking about the one just west of Tower of Hera.
Yeah.
Right? Like you get to that tablet, you read it.
Yeah.
And now it's like you go get the Master Sword, and it's immediately telling you, come to Sanctuary, like, come help us. But, in typical Zelda fashion, you're like, all right, the whole world is depending on me. Ooh, but that tablet up there, now I have the Master Sword.
If I'm headed towards the end of the game.
But you just go, like, you go out of your way. Or especially, like, early on when you see, like, the big rocks, you can't pick them up. But then, like, you got the power. So you naturally want to think, ooh, I remember seeing that one there. I remember seeing that one there. And you want to.
Exactly. You get the flippers. You're like, oh, I can swim everywhere now.
Yeah.
Go under that bridge.
Okay, moving on. The gameplay and the combat.
Yes.
What are your thoughts on this one?
Okay, from a combat perspective, it's very, very fun, very challenging, I think. I think in the last video that I liked the oracles a bit more from the 2D perspective, but I think it's more of what I'm used to. So I do find this a bit more difficult, but I think you have to be very strategic. I think it's a bit punishing.
Okay.
But not as bad as, the earlier Zeldas.
Okay.
But it's also rewarding to once you get good at the game. Like playing it this time now, I remember it being significantly easier than when I played it, 10 years ago.
Just because of your growth as a player.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And it gives you a lot of different items that are useful in a lot of different situations, which I think is key. That'll show back up in the items. So
there's a lot of a lot of different ways of fighting enemies or bosses.
Yes. So that's basically with the combat. I think it's hard. I don't click with it as well as I do like the Game Boy games, but I find it very satisfying, and you have a lot of tools in your chest basically to use.
Yeah. So I like just the movement to me is just so solid.
Okay.
I really like it. It feels natural. It feels really smooth. I love one of my favorite mechanics. I know in the original Legend of Zelda, when you have full hearts, you shoot the sword beam.
Yeah.
But I love the sword beam in this game.
Okay. I'm more of a Zelda 1 sword beam.
Okay. Really?
I think it's the sound effect it comes down to.
Really?
Yeah.
I love the sound effect of this one.
Wop, 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 wop.
It's like, whoa.
Yeah.
Like
it's cool, but
they took 8-bit and made it 16-bit. I love it.
Okay. Because this is gameplay as well as combat.
Yep.
And we've really already talked about the exploration.
Yep.
So I mean, there it is. Basically, is exploring this world is amazing.
Yeah.
So and sometimes tedious, which is why I went with a 4. Like there's certain aspects of this that I don't think totally hold up as well. Now, Zelda games eventually went a route where they just kind of like guide you exactly to where you need to go.
Okay.
And I don't like that either. But sometimes I'm thinking of in Death Mountain, for example, when you're jumping off the ledges to explore the caves.
Okay.
Sometimes you just jump off and you're just back where you were. I find that annoying. You know, it's like, okay, I just got to loop around. I'll jump off the next one. Nothing. Okay, loop around. Same thing in some of the dungeons where it's like you go through a door and it's one-sided and it's like, oh,
you're back here.
Now I just have to loop around to go the one way to get the one thing I missed.
Yeah.
Now in future Zelda games they loop you around. You don't miss anything and then they go, here you go, back where you need to be.
Yeah.
There's a middle ground that I think other games have worked on better. But in general, I think the exploration is like 9 times out of 10 I'm having fun with it.
Right. Yeah. I could think of like in the Ice Palace after you get the big key. You're in this room where you see the big key. You might not have gone to this room, but then you can like push some blocks out of the way. I don't even know if you're.
I know what you're. Yeah.
And if you go back left, you're like, this is the beginning of the dungeon again. And not like it takes 15 minutes to get back, but it's like,
it's just a little annoying.
You got to go through like 7, 8, 9 screens to get back to where, like, why do they, like, I understand why they have that there, so you can see the key where you need to eventually go, but it's like, maybe they should just not make those blocks push or something, because it's not a shortcut. It's really meant to trick you.
Yes.
That's the only...
There's just some tricks in this.
Yeah. I will say, though, the gameplay, the puzzle, this is like... I was having a hard time thinking about the puzzles in this game. Because, like, coming off of Legend of Zelda and Adventure of Link, all the puzzles were either block pushing or there's just, like, a secret wall you walk through. And then this is the first game I think that had, like, more, like, real Zelda puzzles, I felt. They were still a little primitive.
I like it a lot. I think it's really strong because the exploration is the puzzle.
Okay.
Now, there are those... 0.1% of the times where it's a little tedious, but a lot of times I think it's really clever stuff where okay, I'm in this room and I can see I need to get to this room, but I need to bomb this wall. And so, okay, I need to go out and bomb the wall. It's all stuff now that seems pretty standard Zelda stuff, but I still find it really rewarding and satisfying. And I think all the tools they give you, all the items you get for not just combat, but the exploration, I find myself using all of them. Yeah. More in later games where I find using them in a way that's like I'm solving it, not just like there's that wall I need to bomb. Here's this thing I need to hookshot. It's like trying different things even now where I don't have the game totally memorized.
One thing you mentioned how with the gameplay you thought like 10 years ago some stuff was more difficult. I felt that like I learned new solutions to puzzles that like like an example is in Misery Mire when you go to get the cane of Samurai. I remember as a kid having a lot of trouble with this room because you go into the room and I'm quickly trying to run around and maybe I don't know I was just not good with my and the blocks start disappearing and you'd fall. But then like you could make it if you just walk around. Yeah. But then there's like a block you can hookshot over and then quickly run across. Oh, okay. Oh, do you use that?
No, I just run around.
Well, it's like one of those like
too hard of a time with it.
Oh, you can just do that. And I'm like, oh, well, that makes that easier. Right. You know, there's a lot more of that, like in Ganon's Tower at the very end. You know that room where it's like there's a big maze with where the light. You can't see the ground. Yeah. Yeah. There are like 5 ways to solve that.
That's what I love about it is like it encourages trying different things. Yeah. Now it's different than some of the big set pieces like in later games like Twilight Princess where it's like you have to shoot this thing to create a magnetic field that you know it's like these big and exciting things where it's like wow, look at this big crazy thing I'm doing with my item. But from an actual I think a lot of them are better puzzles than a lot of them because it isn't just figure out the one thing you need to use.
Right. Yeah, exactly. There are multiple, like that room in Ganon's Tower, the light one. There are, like, you can just trial and error to try to make your way through, or you can light the torch with the fire out and walk around, but by the time you get there, it's gone. Or you can use the ether medallion. You can just see it flashes for a second.
That's what I did, like, my first time.
Or you can just lift one of the pots, light a fire rod, hook shot across, and then you can quickly run through before it disappears. Yeah. Or there's the speedrunning strat where you just use the Pegasus and run right into the pot and it jumps you over the gap. But that's, I don't think that was intended. But the point is, there's like several solutions, and this is a room that gave me a lot of trouble as a kid, and now I just breeze through because I know what to do. You talk about the items, and that's next on our list. Right away, I just have to say, the pure quantity of items, the uniqueness of them. I don't know if this is the largest inventory you have in the Zelda series. I think it is. Maybe Twilight Princess might be bigger. But I mean, I absolutely love the items in this game. Yeah. And I love that so many of them are not even essential.
They're not all essential, but all very useful. Yes. I think. And again, it's so open that you can use a lot of them in various situations. So it has a similar thing that I think Breath of the Wild has, where you have a wild arsenal of stuff that is, if you mess around with certain things, you will get satisfying results that make you feel like, oh, that was a good way to use that. Yeah. It's a little bit more action focused too. Like, a lot of them, I think, are in good combat items. Yeah. And again, it's still very open.
What I love about the items, and this is something I like as a kid, I always had the boomerang equipped. That was my go-to item. And then later on in the Dark World, I have the hook shot, and those were always the equipable items I had. Yeah. And those were my go-tos. And then whenever there's a lot of enemies, I'd always use bombos. That was just like my go-to because it killed everything, you know. Mm-hmm. And but then as, you know, like especially with like the Zelda Dungeon Marathon and seeing other people play, you start realizing people have other strategies that you don't really use. And people questioning my strategies. Like
these have worked since the 90s.
I always got the ice rod right away. And I used the ice rod to fight the land molars. Okay. The boss, the second dungeon, the desert, because they crush them in 2 hits or something. They're dead. Okay. But it uses a lot of magic, and and people are like, oh, I didn't know you can use the ice rod. I'm like, yeah. You can. Yeah. Like, why wouldn't you? You know, like why wouldn't you? It's the most effective. And then I see, like, I watch some streams or some guy's fighting. I think it was blind, and he's using the cane of Burna. I'm like, oh, sure. I rarely ever use that item, but it's great against him because now you don't have to worry about the heads, and you can just go and smack them away, and it's like, all right.
I definitely found myself in a lot of situations, even to this day, where I'm like, feel kind of a bit backed against the wall, and I'm like, all right, pause, look at my inventory, what will get me out of this jam? And that was one of them, because I was low on hearts, and I was like, oh, I'm in a real pickle. I was in like a tough area, and I was like, you know what, use the cane. You know, I think that's to a lot of people now who might be playing it for the first time and struggling with it. Like, don't be afraid to use your items. Like you mentioned bombos. I didn't even use that a lot, but like, if you're in a bad spot, like, use it. You know, granted, you will use up magic, but the game's pretty good, I think, about giving you magic refills.
And it's like, magic matters. It definitely does. And you get the half magic upgrade, and it's great because now you can actually. So, because I used to be a little conservative. I was like, I don't want to waste my magic because I might need it. And but then there's like some items. The other item I'll say is the cane samurai, where I used to think of it as, oh, that just puts a block down. But like then I see like some like people on, like I've watched people stream or whatever, and they use it, that secondary attack it has that I didn't even know was an attack.
Oh, or you can make it shoot fire, right?
You drop you drop it and you press it again, and it explodes and goes in forward directions.
I didn't use that as much, but I can also think of a situation. I don't remember exactly what the enemy was, but I was in a room where an enemy was giving me trouble, but I was trying to do something down here in the corner, so I just like put the block down as like maybe it's like a little
defense
extra
mechanism?
barrier. And it helped actually because I got to route some of the enemies around the block. I was coming off of because we did our Let's Play on A Link Between Worlds, and I assembled a whole bunch of items that I should have used more honestly, but a lot of times I just like the good old sword. I think just because maybe it's the more immediate thing and you don't have to pause and stuff. But maybe I got outside of that a little bit because I did just find myself going into the bag of tricks.
Okay.
A lot. Maybe it too is because I constantly felt like with the navigation and the puzzles, like, oh, I need to try this. So I'm like, oh yeah, I got this item out. Like, let's use it some more.
Yeah. And to me, like, there are some enemies. It's just ingrained in my head at this point. It's like, oh, like I forgot the name of the enemy, but I think he first appears in Turtle Rock, where it's like. It's almost like the Pokies from like Link's and like from Mario, where there's like 5 little balls on top of each other.
Yeah.
And you hit them and they just.
Yeah. They
like,
go
how do you
nuts.
kill that guy? Like
I think I just sorted them.
Yeah, like I use the fire rod exclusively against them because it's one hit and it's dead.
Oh.
And it's
okay.
like because that used to always give me like, oh god, these things are gonna. This is gonna. It's like I've developed these new. Like now I'm so. Like I know the game so well, so I just immediately do these things.
Yeah.
But there's new it's
yeah.
There's so many different strategies that different people have using your arsenal of weapons that I love it.
And I love too that some of the items are useful. They're useful story items that aren't necessary. Like the Book of Medora, I think is a cool story item. Just I think it's just interesting. Same thing with the Magic Mirror. Or the Moon Pearl, even I love, and I love that you could like miss that and just it's that's kind of goes back to the tedium, but I do just think like how these kind of again tie a little bit into the story, and I find them more interesting than some later games where it's like I don't know, you get some of these story items for their one use and that's it. Whereas like I'm always the book, you've got all these areas you need to go to, you know what it does. The mirror is obviously more than just a story item, but it's you even when you get that, you get a little bit of a interesting flavor text where it's like you feel it's pulling you into another world.
Yeah,
love it.
And I think just because the pure quantity of items, it makes these items that are very specific use. They don't feel like I felt this way in Twilight Princess a little bit. Some of these items are like kind of useless after 1 or 2 uses, like the slingshot or like the spinner after, but
exactly,
like I don't feel that way about the Book of Medora, even though it's the exact same thing. Like it's like, oh, this thing has 4 uses and that's it.
Yeah, well, I think it might have to do with the scale of the game and
maybe. Yeah,
and with that one, you're just kind of like translating some text. Where it's like the spinner, it's like that would be fun to use more.
Yeah. Moving on, we got the dungeons, and this is another one that I kind of went back and forth with.
Yeah.
And then I settled on giving it a perfect 5.
I was close to that, honestly.
So I was originally thinking all right, this is a top-down 16-bit game. Like all the dungeons are kind of, it doesn't have the diversity of some of the later games. But then the more I started thinking about it, especially once you get into the Dark World, but even the Light World, like each dungeon is totally unique from the next one.
Unique for exploration wise, for one,
and like the mechanic of it,
the mechanic and the theme. I think this is the first game to have themed dungeons. I think
that's like it introduced a lot of things that have become staples in the Zelda series.
Yeah,
like when you go to the Swamp Palace and it's raising and lowering water levels. Like, oh, I can't reach that ladder. Oh, I gotta raise the water. How do I raise the? Oh, I gotta go back. And it's like that internal puzzle solving that goes through your head of how to do these things. But yeah, it is like an early version of some of these like water dungeons that came
with that. Like Zelda 1, I think actually did a decent job, at least with like the enemy selection.
Okay,
kind of giving it a sort of vibe in some of the dungeons. Like, okay, these types of enemies are here. But this, with the theme of like the Swamp Palace, they do a good job of like, here's some like types of enemies you would find in like a water sort of area. They do that same thing in like the desert. You know, you get the things coming out of the ground, and the levers and the boss too. You know, it like that's just. I mean, that's again seems obvious now, but this game really did that.
Yeah, and it had like the Ice Palace was totally unique in that it was all ice themed and ice based weapon enemies that only appear in that palace. Does it make sense? Sort of what you were saying. And then like some of the dungeons are totally unique, like Skull Woods.
Yeah, that's I think my favorite one because I love that. We talked about this a lot in Twilight Princess of like integrating the dungeon into the world. This one literally has you. Also, the overworld is the dungeon too, and I think that is pretty incredible. Not a lot of games have really done that in that way.
Yeah.
There's even in other dungeons in this game, there's some parts where you go outside and come back inside. I think that's cool, but Skull Woods really is the standout.
Yeah, and especially there's the whole first part of the dungeon, which really you can get I believe the compass and dungeon, but like you can't. Everything is locked behind keys or the big key, and you can't even do anything. And it's like, but that's the area that the game guides you towards because that's the intro portion. But you got to go to the second part, explore deeper into the woods to get the big key.
Yes.
That's really the first thing you need to do. And it's like, it's one of those things that when you replay the game now and you're like kind of running through it quickly, you know to do these things. But that's such a unique dungeon.
There's Misery Mire.
That's, yeah.
You're heading towards one little touch that I like that I never really thought about this time is you're getting close to the boss. I don't remember the boss's name. Vitriox, of course. They don't tell you some of the boss's names.
No,
some are obvious, like, or they're iconic.
I think they do in the Game Boy Advance version. Does it appear?
Maybe.
I think it comes up.
Not to take... This is an awesome boss, I think. But anyway, you're getting closer, and it's, you know, the slime thing. But in, like, the rooms right before... The dungeons do a good job of, like, you go through the boss key door or whatever it is, the big key door, and it does feel like, oh, we're getting close. Not all of them have this. Some of them, there's, like, a whole dungeon still. But this one, as you're getting closer, you get to those rooms where things are starting to drop from the ceiling.
Okay.
And they don't stop. And it's like, oh, this is good. It just, to me, like, a little touch that, like, heightened it up. And then you get there, and it is, like, this, you know, this slimy, gross guy. You know?
Yeah. You know, I never even made that connection.
Yeah.
The Zols that are falling down.
Yeah, to me, I don't know if that's what it meant to be, but it's right before the boss. And
that makes sense.
I was like, oh, we're ramping up. We're getting there.
Yeah. What I love about Misery Mire is that's the number one dungeon that comes to mind when I think of where do you want to go?
Yeah.
Because there are a bazillion keys in that dungeon, and you only need like 3. Like you don't need to explore. I think like over half of the rooms in that dungeon if you don't want to.
Yeah, I think I've mentioned this in previous videos, but I love where you have all these keys and options to use them. I think I had like 5 keys at some point.
Yeah.
And it's extremely open, and it's before they established the formula of like there's this direct path you need to kind of go on with some options. I would say there's alternatives that I like I liked in the Oracles how it was a bit more focused, but you could still end certain dungeons with more keys.
Yeah.
It's an alternative to this. I love this too, where it feels like this is a place. It just has these different facets that you can go to, and sometimes you might need to go there. Sometimes who knows what else is there. There might be some reward or an item. You don't want to miss the item, so you might want to check out this room.
Right.
Yeah, I love the open nature of this. I much prefer this to a more specific path.
Well, I actually feel they do. It's kind of like the best of both worlds because I think there's other dungeons like the Tower of Hera, where the theme of that one is sort of verticality, where you have to fall down from higher levels to get like the dungeon item, or you can get to like a fairy fountain. But I mean, like, that is a very linear dungeon once you start climbing the tower. Not that it's that big to begin with.
Well, I like the linear dungeons in this, like that, like even Hyrule Castle.
Yep.
When you're heading
Hyrule Castle is probably the main one.
It's awesome because you're just fighting all these knights. Oh, that's so sick.
Or the second half of Ganon's tower is like that.
Yeah.
But that's sort of like you went through the big key, you got the big key, That's the whole the bottom basement floor is gigantic.
Yeah.
But it's like then you go through that door and it's just like a gauntlet of tougher and tougher enemies, and you fight some of the old bosses again.
Yeah, there's a lot of detail that you would kind of... I could see, like, if you just blew through this, maybe you wouldn't be noticing or thinking about it, but I'm still noticing the stuff every time I play it. So,
yeah.
On top of it, it's just a big bag of dungeons. It's
the quantity is enormous.
Again, without sacrificing... Each one is unique in its own way. So.
There's 3 in the light world, 7 in the dark world, 2 Hyrule castles, Ganon's tower. So with 13 dungeons in this game, it's the most of any Zelda game. It's the best. I
gave it a 4 instead of a 5, and the only reason was because of what I mentioned in a different category. Is every once in a while I love backtracking in dungeons, but sometimes there was some tedium associated with it, where I think there's a middle ground where, like in Link's Awakening and Oracles, you get a warp point after. There's no mini bosses in this really, so like you don't get like a good warp point, and sometimes it spits you out in an area where it's like, okay, I know all I need to do is just go in a loop and come back. Again, not the end of the world, because I think it's one of the best games in terms of dungeons.
Related to that are the bosses, as well as like just the enemies of the game. To me, like you mentioned that you don't know the names of the bosses, but
I know a lot of them actually. But that one that's just kind of a weird old fantasy sounding name. Whereas like the other ones, maybe because they've been reoccurring.
Okay.
I would remember more, like Trinix or whatever stuff like that.
Okay.
But yeah, stuff like, is it Cold Stare is one of them?
Yeah.
Kind of a
Argus,
weird name.
Cold Stare.
Argus has come back, so I know Argus. But I think they're all iconic bosses. I don't think there's one in this that is not memorable.
Yeah. Well, some of them are either repeats or not really repeats, but like advancements of previous enemies from Legend of Zelda. Like the Landmolus. Like Moldorm. Even like the Armos Knights are big.
They're all iconic on their own as these big monsters that you fight, but also I think they're all a really good combat. Like, it's more combat focused than ever than other Zelda games, where it's kind of set into again the formula. I think that's a big thing with everything in A Link to the Past, is it's starting to establish the formula, but it's before it's set. And I love the middle ground, and that's what this is, where it's like a lot of the bosses, the items you get are helpful to a lot of them, but a lot of them you could just sword them if you really were trying. That makes it a little bit harder, but
it did not establish the formula of you need the dungeon item to beat the dungeon boss. That's definitely not a thing in this game.
Yeah,
at least not yet.
But most of them, you're gonna be better off using your items, and you should use your items. So.
Yeah, you could, and it's like a lot of them, sort of like I mentioned, the Landmolus battle. There are like 3 different. You can. Like, when you fight Landmolus, do you just use your sword?
I used to, but I still did a lot. But this time around, I tried to arrow him. It's a bit challenging because it's not as like immediate as like
you have to
later Zelda.
Where is he going? And but it's
fun.
It's a safe strategy because you don't have to go in. You don't have to worry about the rock city.
It does more damage than your sword at that point too.
And so like you can use that. I use the ice rod. You use this. So this is the second boss in the game, and there's all these different strategies depending on your inventory, what you want to use. And can you use bombs? I don't even know if you can use bombs, but
I don't know. I've never tried.
You can make custom challenges too. I remember like a couple years ago at the marathon, we were like, all right, you got to kill Mothula using only the hammer. Like,
okay, that's cool.
You can do that.
I didn't know you could do that. Yeah,
and it's like, imagine doing that in real life. Like a flying moth, you're hitting it with a hammer.
Give you a fly swatter.
Yeah, this is not a very efficient method, but
I love it.
It can be done.
It's also a diverse set of regular enemies.
Yes,
like one of the most.
Yeah, the pure quantity of enemies is
and when you switch over into the dark world too,
it's like a lot of them have dark world like counterparts, but they're the same like style enemy. But then some of them do incredible amount of damage too.
Like the difficulty when you go into the dark world and there's the Hynixes. I remember like the first time I really truly tried to play this game back in the day, like I was just getting wrecked by Hynixes right away because I was like, They do unfathomable amount of damage if you haven't collected a ton of stuff at that point.
Right. Well, I think just like the popos, I think they're like
Yeah.
little like slime guys that are, and, or that might be the light world. But I think those guys and the little snapdragons that are just jumping around, some of them do like, I think 4 hearts of damage. I think if they touch you, like it's like wow, and you don't have that much health when you first enter. But anyway, there is a variety, and we sort of talked about it with like the Ice Palace, but it's like all the dungeons have some enemies that are unique to just that dungeon, just that area, and it's fantastic. And then they have, I think almost every enemy from Legend of Zelda is in A Link to the Past. I think almost everyone. Maybe 1 or 2 might not be in there. Are there Wizard? Oh yeah, there are Wizard.
Oh yeah, Misery Mire.
Yeah, exclusively in Misery Mire. That's their dungeon.
Which I don't like. Some things like that make me wonder.
They're in Ganon's Tower too, I think. But yeah.
Are they? Well, okay, so that's a little different. But stuff like that makes me wonder, like, why are they there? Why are they in Misery Mire?
Okay,
it's a swamp thing, like. And then you get to thinking, like, you start creating all these theories in your head,
Yeah.
Maybe that was only me, but...
And then there's Lionels in this game. But there are only 3 of them, and they're in between. Yes. But they're pretty...
Gosh. They will mess you up.
I love their design. They
look awesome. Yeah.
I love that they save them for that area. Mm-hmm. It's like...
Yeah, there's one thing in this and some of the other 2D games that are inspired by it that... Zelda has gotten away from, and I think it's because it's a family-friendly series, but an enemy I just love is that there's soldiers you fight. Okay. I think maybe because once you go to 3D, it's like...
They're the good guys.
They don't want you stabbing, like, humans. They want... you fight, like, Lizalfos and Stalfos and stuff, but, can you think of a 3D game where you kill a human?
No. Dark Link.
not a person. Yeah. Sorry, Dark Link fans. Not a person.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I love that little thing. That's just a little thing I notice when I'm here, mostly because you're in the town and they're like, Link's here, and then like these soldiers come after you, and you're like, I'm a wanted criminal and I'm murdering the police. I guess
Right.
One thing that's worth talking about this too that I've realized we got to keep talking about in these is the final boss.
Okay. We keep missing that, right?
Well, we got Aghanim, who invented the tennis mechanic. I like the Aghanim fight, and then the Aghanim character, kind of a precursor for what Ganondorf would kind of be, like the behind the big bad. And then Ganon, I think, is awesome.
It might be my favorite final boss in the Zelda series.
Me too.
It's got like 4 or 5 stages, variant, as it goes.
It's so fast-paced, action-packed. The mood, the little, like samurai quotes he's saying to you or whatever, like these very intense, things, or I guess he also says "unguard" or whatever. But I love what he says, all his dialogue. But then, yeah, it's an awesome fight. It's a really challenging and tough boss fight, and it's his best design.
Yeah,
I love it.
Moving on, side content X. This is probably, other than the story, the other one that gave me the most trouble.
Okay.
And I settled with 5 again. This ties in a lot with the items, I think, because when you think about, this is one of those things. It's like, what is side content?
It blurs the line for sure.
It's like everything that's not needed to beat the game. And also, if you're just running through the game, you wouldn't ordinarily come by. Like, you don't need the boomerang to beat this game, but everybody's getting the boomerang because it's the dungeon item of the sewers or something. But it's an optional item. You don't need it. But like, when you think of all, like, you can beat this game without a bottle. Bottles are optional.
Yeah.
But there's 4 of them in the world. Like, the bug catching net is optional. The cane of Burna is optional. The bombo, I think you need ether and quake, but bombos is optional. The magic cape is like, how many Zelda games do you know where you can beat the game without a third of the inventory?
Yeah.
And not only that, there's a lot of, like, I played this game probably 30 times through as a kid and still didn't get all the items. Because I didn't know that the gold sword even existed as a kid. I thought the tempered sword was it. And it was like not until the 2000s when I was starting Zelda, I'm like, wait, what's this artwork of this sword? There's another sword in this game? What?
That's awesome, yeah.
And then similarly, like you can catch the bees.
Yeah, and there's the
good bee.
The good bee
that comes back. Look, I didn't know that existed either.
Right.
And so these are like things that like I discovered years later, and this is all what I consider like side content.
Yeah.
That being said, I do think this is a bit of a sign of the times, though. This game it's an early Zelda game, so there's not a bajillion collectibles like there are in some of the later games.
Mm-hmm.
And I love the collectathons. That's kind of my thing. But this one, it had just the heart pieces. But I feel, and I mentioned this earlier, they were kind of scattered about the world, and like there were some you can get right away, and like I feel that they were paced appropriately throughout the game, and I feel they were meaningful. Because when you got a heart piece, that was kind of a big deal.
That's the thing with me, is like it has no collectathon, but one, it blurs the line between what's a required item and what's not, and then every item you do get, everything you do get, it's so impactful.
Yes.
That you would like, I can't, like, you get it and you're like, oh, remember when I didn't have this,
Right. And it's just one of those things, like when you think of a game, like we just did Oracle Seasons. And when we've done Twilight Princess, you can get the Hawkeye as a. Is that the only optional item in there? Or the horse call, is that an optional item?
I think so, yeah.
But it's like, are those exciting weapons?
It's kind of fun, but
like,
yeah.
But bombos, like,
it is cool. And even with that, it blurs the line really well. Where there's 3 medallions. Mm-hmm. 2 of them are required. Mm-hmm. One of them, and I can never remember which is the one actually that I, other than looking at the symbol. But like,
I think bombos is not required.
Like if you asked me before and after playing the game, I wouldn't remember.
I might be wrong actually. I don't even know.
I think Ether.
Ether opens up Misery Mire.
Yeah.
And I think Quake, that's when he jumps and stabs the ground. Yeah. That's in Turok, which I love that scene, by the way.
It's cool, yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, yeah, I think that's great from like blurring the lines perspective. I love there's just all these little caves and fairy fountains you can find where you're throwing your rupees in.
Yeah.
My only real knock against it, and it's it doesn't have the collectathons, which I don't care about, but there are all these mini games which I think are cool. It's kind of like the Twilight Princess thing, but like those it's just usually like you get some rupees or something.
A lot of them are games of chance too.
Yeah.
They took there's the money making game from Legend of Zelda that's back in this.
Uh-huh.
But then there's there's the treasure chest game. Open 2 treasure chests.
Yeah.
And you just I want to get the heart piece, so I just open them up over and over.
Yeah.
And the rewards don't feel good unless you get the heart piece.
Yeah.
Or there's the digging game, which is sort of the same thing.
Digging game's kind of fun, but but then there's just a lot of, I feel maybe there isn't as many as I think, but I just remember going to a lot of different rooms and what's this? And it's a guy just going like, you want to open up a chest?
Yeah.
And I'm like, does this give me anything eventually? Because it doesn't tell you.
Right.
And so that's the only thing. It wasn't enough to like it just took it from a 5 to a 4 basically. I'm like, make that something,
Did you play the archery game?
Yeah, I did.
The thing and the guy, every time you hit him, I love the sound effects.
I love that whole scene and everything, but you don't get anything from that.
No, it's just rupees. Yeah.
Yeah.
It'd be cool if they lock the heart piece behind that, or
even like Ocarina, you get a bigger quiver.
Yeah.
I know you can increase your quiver in this one.
Yeah.
With the fountain, but why not? I don't know. That's what I'm saying. Like maybe, it's the times a little bit.
Yeah, I actually completely agree with you on the mini games, and this was one of the things I was wrestling with. But I felt at the end of the day, because I feel like the items are a bigger thing, and getting those as rewards,
I 100% agree,
is what put it over the top. And I'm like, I don't know what other Zelda game does this better.
Yeah,
so
I would agree. But I couldn't give it all 5s.
That's fair.
I was very close to doing that, though.
All right, music and sound.
Well, I knew how you were gonna feel about this, but
I'll start with this one. It has so many of the iconic songs that people think of now with Zelda that are associated with it, and I'm not just talking about like the Dark World, but like Zelda's Lullaby started in this one. Kakariko Village started in this one. Hyrule Castle started, and these are some of the like iconic songs that this is their origin. But it's not just that. We talked about this with the recent compendium. But some of my favorite songs are like the ending credits Like the ending theme and sort of combine them. The Dark World is obviously one of the more memorable songs from this game because it plays in the overworld. I love the Dark Death Mountain, and it's one of those things where I like the the fortune teller theme. I like the minigame theme. It's one of those. Maybe this is just nostalgia a little bit, but I think every single song in this game is good.
Yeah, and I would agree. Yeah,
and some of them are really good.
And you mentioned like the ending theme or like that whole. Like, we didn't even really talk about when we talked about the story about how some of these epic scenes, like you go and you talk to the Triforce in the end, which still doesn't
essence of the Triforce.
The essence of the Triforce, which doesn't take away from the mystery of it. Still, like I said, it's still like, what is happening here? But then you also have just a little jingle. You have pulling the Master Sword. That became another one
That was a scene as a kid. Every time I got to that, I would put the volume on maximum. Dude, like, yeah, you pull the sword from the stone. Like,
yeah, I agree with you. Like, not only does it doesn't just define this game, it defines this series, and it also just defines this era of gaming in a lot of ways. It's similar to like the Mario soundtracks do. Like, these are some of the most iconic pieces of video game music.
Mm-hmm.
And it also builds off. You've got that new version of the original overworld theme.
Yep.
But then they flip it and they give you the dark world theme, which is just like, here's the two sides of the same coin. Again, yeah. I just think
every time I hear the dark world theme, I just get pumped too. I don't know about you, but that,
yeah.
I remember as a kid, I had the Sound and Drama soundtrack. This was more in my teens. And I would, like, before, like, a big baseball game, I'm, like, putting my uniform on, and I'm playing the orchestrated version of The Dark World from the Sound and Drama soundtrack.
That's so awesome.
That was my, we're, like, getting ready for war. I'm going to a baseball game.
My only knock, and it's not, again, not a huge thing, but I kind of got a little bit tired of the repeat dungeon themes.
Yeah.
Later games changed that.
Yeah.
But I think that was, for its time, it probably wasn't something people really thought about. But
right,
just the fact that I had two separate ones on top of the Hyrule Castle and Ganon's Tower, like, to me, that was moving the series forward still.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, we're talking about sound. I again, in the last video, I marked off for the magnetic gloves. This one, the heart low noise. Really just got on my nerves because it's very pulsating and constant.
That used to bother me a lot, but I think
you just got good.
Yeah, it still happens from time to time. I'm like, but it does add to the stress a little bit.
It does, and it didn't even happen to me either. I mean, I died a couple of times, but my need to get hearts when that happens is more to make the sound stop.
Okay.
Then, like, I'm gonna die,
Got it. Okay, that's fair.
But again, this is iconic. This is one of the best video game soundtracks of all time.
With the sound, I love the progression of the sound noise for your sword as well.
Oh, sure, yeah.
When you have the regular sword, the Master Sword has like a difference, and then when you get the Tempered Sword and the Gold Sword, it's like a stronger swipe each time.
Okay.
And I love the chime when it shoots the beam blade.
Yeah. Oh, maybe that's another good reason for 4 that I didn't think of. Is like, it's not my favorite game sound effects wise.
Oh, okay.
But maybe I don't know what it is. I like the Oracles more. I like the original Legend of Zelda more as far as those old chiptune sounds. But
I love the sound. I love like the little, like when you use the mirror. When you
Okay, I'm back on board. Yeah.
Or the flute.
That's cool.
Like, I love all of these little chimes almost that are not part of the soundtrack, but they're
they're just as important for sure.
So
I didn't give it any 3s this game.
I gave it 1 3 for the story, which I like I said, I struggled with.
But you did rate it higher than me. You get 4.7 to my 4.5. So
yeah, and so overall, we liked this game better than the community did.
Yeah. So they seem to like it a lot.
Yeah, so we'll put up the final stats here. We now have 3 different lists overall.
Yes.
Because the community voted has Twilight Princess at the top, A Link to the Past, Oracle Seasons. But now we have some diversion with the staff because the staff voted A Link to the Past slightly higher.
Okay, it was very close though.
Yes. Our lists are identical still.
Yeah. Who knows if when we'll get to the change.
It will happen.
Yeah.
I mean,
sure.
It might happen with the next game. It could. Who knows? We'll see. Again, the numbers are kind of all up for interpretation. I think at the end of the day, like maybe the community one could be considered the most important. Maybe.
Is the staff the tastemakers here? Because they're matching the average.
Yeah, but they're like. So what's unique about this is why these lists are gonna get so different. Mm-hmm. Obviously, this is our list, so our weight is stronger for the average. So, like, if you look at the average, the scores themselves, Twilight Princess and Oracle are barely, neck and neck. But then there's like a giant gap. So by the end of the day, there's going to be a huge gap between A Link to the Past and Twilight Princess when other games start filling in, because there's a lot of room to fill in. But again, up for interpretation. Tell us which list matches yours the best right now. We can announce our game for the month of April will be The Legend of Zelda Spirit. Well, that's going to do it, but
yes,
I'm excited about replaying. This is the Zelda game that I haven't played in the longest period of time all the way through. So
this is one of the games I've played this game once.
Okay.
So
as always, if you look in the description, there's a link to a Google form where you can fill out your opinions so you can have your voice heard in the community polls section. And just as always, that will be open probably through the first 10 days of April. So go ahead and play some Spirit Tracks with us. It's available on the Wii U eShop or obviously on the DS or 3DS. All right, well, thanks for watching, guys, and we will see you guys next month.